5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
What do you think, Marge? All I need is a title.
The book of Judges contains the continuation of the genocidal conquest of Canaan, this time through the period when the lands are ruled by a series of prophets called Judges, hence the title of the book. Apparently, in the various translations of the Bible, some scribes way back when got the chapters mixed up, so chapters 17 through 25 should actually be at the beginning of the book. So if we evaluate the book with those chapters in the correct order, we see that after the genocidal conquest of the Promised Lands, the Hebrew nation has again fallen into sinning against God, and they have started worshipping local gods such as Baal and Ashtaroth. Ashtaroth, you'll remember from previous episodes of the Atheist Bible studies, was the Canaanite goddess of war and love, who at times was said to be the wife of Yahweh. It is interesting to think that the Hebrews had their own version of their warfare between the gods that pervades Greek myths. So the people sink deep into their sins, and the lands end up being conquered. After Joshua has died, the people have no divine leader, so God is content to sit back and allow the Hebrews to learn their lesson. And that lesson is meted out with the disintegration of society, as murder, rape, genocide, kidnappings, and other chaos threaten to rip the lands apart. God apparently got tired of making actual appearances after Moses, and he stopped doing miracles after Joshua. So why would the people who at this point were not familiar with the miraculous journey out of Egypt, or the miraculous conquest of the lands of Canaan, why should they care about a God who appears to be absent from the scene? When the people get tired of all the chaos, they plead to God. Perhaps seeing that the lack of religious leadership was at least somewhat part of the problem, God decides to send aid to the Hebrews in the form of a series of prophets or judges to help the people repent from their sins, to lead the nation in a moral or religious sense, and to lead them into battle. It should still be noted that even at this late date, God has not fulfilled the promises He's made to the Hebrews and their ancestors, that the lands of Canaan would be theirs. Rather, God has kept a few of the heathen tribes around, basically so that He can have someone to torment the Hebrews with when they get out of line, which happens over and over again in this part of the Old Testament.
What a dumbass!
So it was with the early judges, Othniel, Ehud, and Shamgar. These all came upon the scene, they led the nation out of sin, they were victorious in battle, but when they died, the Hebrews fell back into their sin. If God's omnipotence was as great as His patience was in these stories, there would be no doubt that He exists. The first major judge turns out to be the first and last female to be in the role. Deborah becomes a prophetess, and with her general, Barak, leads the people into battle against Sisera, a Canaanite general, one of the few enemy generals named in the Bible. It is interesting that in this case, the woman can lead the people through religion, but has to have a man to lead the military. In any event, Deborah, along with Barak and Jael, defeats Sisera and his army, and then spend the next chapter of the book celebrating it. The next judge is Gideon, who again brings the people out of their sin and leads them into battle, this time against the Midianites, who apparently were not all wiped out the last time the Hebrews clashed with them. This is not a foregone conclusion, as Gideon has doubts, both about himself and about whether God will support him. He wonders why God has allowed all the chaos to happen to the Hebrews, and he doubts whether God will be behind him as he leads. Perhaps this explains why God has the Hebrews under Gideon take only 300 soldiers against Midian, so he can prove to his own selected prophet that he is who he claims to be. Of all of the judges, Gideon's end is perhaps the most tragic, as after he dies, one of his sons goes nuts and kills most of the rest of the family. This atrocity shocks the entire Hebrew nation and ends the peace that Gideon had fought to bring. Several more minor judges follow, continuing the love-hate cycle between the Hebrews and their God. Then a man named Jepthah arises from obscurity to become the new judge. However, it may be that Jepthah becomes more well known for his lack of judgment, as he probably became the object of a lot of morbid jokes. Jepthah prays to God for victory in an upcoming battle against the neighboring Ammonites. He says that if he is victorious, he will take the first person that greets him when he returns home and make a burnt sacrifice of them. Yes, folks, it's the Abraham test again. But this time, since it's not God's idea, I think God decides to push this just to see how far Jepthah is willing to go. So Jepthah is victorious and heads home. As he approaches the door, his only daughter comes out and greets him. Jepthah apologizes to his daughter, but says that he's made a vow to the Lord and he can't take it back. The daughter apparently happily goes along with the idea and is sacrificed. That's one hard way to learn again not to make an oath in God's name. He might hold you to it. After Jepthah, there were 3 rather unimportant judges, and then we get to the one everyone knows. A man whose tale is so tall, almost everyone knows it. We are, of course, talking about Samson. In fact, as Shmoop's commentary on Samson states, elements of Samson's character can be found in Superman, the Punisher, James Bond, the Hulk, and even Jesus. In fact, in 2018, Bruce McDonald directed a film version of the story of Samson, starring Taylor James, Jackson Rathbone, Billy Zane, Lindsay Wagner, Caitlin Leahy, and Rutger Hauer. While Gideon fought the Midianites and Jepthah fought the Amorites, Samson's biggest foe would be the Philistines, a powerful tribe situated where the Gaza Strip is today. This is the tribe that harasses the Hebrews throughout their time in the Promised Land. And in fact, scholars cite this as the reason why the Hebrews did not go directly from Goshen in northeastern Egypt to the Promised Land, as they would have had to have directly crossed Philistine territory. Samson's family was very God-fearing, and they raised their child to follow in their footsteps. So Samson was decent as a judge in the moral and religious sense, but what it seems he was called for was delivering the Hebrews from the oppression of the Philistines. Now, it was not that Samson had super strength and he walked around with it every day. When he was in trouble or threatened or in battle, the Spirit of the Lord would be given to him and his strength would increase Hulk-like. However, like the rest of humankind, Samson has flaws, those being easy to anger and being quite immature. He starts off by wanting to marry a Philistine woman and just goes on from there. He is also a complete lech, which ended up getting him into trouble. Much like the Greek legend of Achilles, so long as the one thing did not happen, Samson is powerful and able to kill and lust without anything or anyone stopping him. However, while in a drunken stupor, he lets it slip to his girlfriend Delilah that his secret is his hair, and that he will remain powerful so long as he has it. He then falls asleep and Delilah cuts his hair and informs the Philistines who surround the place and take Samson prisoner. They rip out his eyes and throw him in a jail cell in the city. Now here come the most important 2 words in the story. Time passes. The Philistines were going to have a major celebration over the capture of Samson, an enemy who had killed so many of their people. Now, at some point, Samson rests against some of the pillars that support most of the way to the temple house. His hair regrown, Samson prays to God, asking for his strength back one last time, then pushes the pillars over, killing more people in his death than he had during the course of his life. Samson is an example of a Superman with a mortal flaw. It's an example of what might happen if a man was given godlike powers. And I happen to agree with some of my source material, which opines that God must have wound up Samson GTA style and set him loose, just to see what kind of damage, murder, and mayhem he might cause, because God is fun that way. While Judges continue to be mentioned in the first book of Samuel, as well as both of the books of Chronicles, the actual book of Judges ends here. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll continue onward through the books of the Bible.